Video games are the latest craze to sweep the country and most of the world, too. Millions of people are addicted to hours of gazing at electronic images on game screens in arcades and in their own homes. What makes video games so popular? Well, we search for an answer as we begin a special series on Video Fever, games people play.
In the 80s and 90s, arcades were the place to be for any kid looking to have a little cheap fun. Walking in, putting a quarter or token into the game of their choice, and spending hours at a place like this. Many came with their friends to play games like classic arcade basketball, air hockey, and skee-ball. But then, others came to play some intense games. Arcades became the place to compete, from fighters to shooters to racers. Many came into arcades with their friends, or even rivals to play against, and with each other. If someone was looking for a solid 1v1 battle, fighters and racers were the way to go. Mortal Kombat, Primal Rage, Tekken, and Street Fighter II were prime choice for competing in heated combat. Cruisin' USA and Daytona USA were also two of the most popular racers to compete to see who was truly the champion behind the wheel. But if you were looking to be friendly and play cooperatively, shooters were the best way to go. Of course, it was possible to compete with one another in shooting-based arcade games, which were also known as rail shooters, due to the feeling of being on a roller coaster riding along a rail-like track as the players shot at enemies. At the end of every level, many games tallied up a score based on how many enemies were killed per player, a player's accuracy, as well as the overall time it took to finish a level. But one of the biggest parts of these rail shooters is how far players can progress in the story. Story mode, in which one or two players can work together to complete. Games like Time Crisis, Area 51, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and many more. But there are two games in particular that I'm going to talk about that eventually brought attention to a genre that basically never existed up until this point in arcade history. This genre being the horror rail shooter. It all began with Laser Ghost, developed and released by Sega in 1989. It was a simplistic 2D shooter with 3D effects, in where the player would use their light gun to shoot ghosts who were going around terrorizing a city. It wasn't quite a blockbuster of an arcade game, but it opened the door for Sega and inspired the developer to begin work on a game that literally took horror rail shooter to the next level. The next game they released was a game titled
The House of the Dead.
It was originally released in Japan in September of 1996 and eventually released worldwide in 1997. You play as Agent Thomas Rogan, who receives a phone call from his fiancée saying she desperately needs help. So alongside your partner, Agent G, it's the player's job to go and investigate exactly what's going on, save your fiancée, and attempt to put an end to all this madness. When Agent Rogan arrives at the house, he realizes the dead have come back to life in the form of mindless, yet violent zombies. Rogan fought against the hulking chariot, Hanged Man, Hermit, and the most infamous of all, Magician. all sorts of zombies and creatures are fought against, from overweight and decomposing undead to worms, bats, and semi-cybernetic creatures. These horrific beings would pop right into the player's face, causing occasional jump scares and spikes in heart rates. The game can be beaten within a 30-minute time frame and is regarded as one of the best arcade games of all time. The game for its time was quite forward-thinking, as it even had multiple endings. It became famous because of its horrific premise, solid control, and overall fun. It was fun to go and shoot up filthy zombies who were looking to take a bite out of your fiancé. At the time, the only other game that was somewhat similar was Resident Evil, which released in 1996, but that game was only released on console to be played at home. In arcades, House of the Dead was one of a kind. It was thrilling, suspenseful, and most of all, scary, yet fun. There were almost no others like it. House of the Dead, although very popular at the time, showed us something that was very apparent. The horror rail shooter genre was sparse. This created a need and an idea, which paved the way for a mysterious and infamous game titled
Welcome to Carnevil!
Carnevil. Carnevil was a game developed and released by Midway. Midway were also the developers of the original Cruisin' series, Hydro Thunder, Miss Pac-Man, and most controversial of all, the original Mortal Kombat games. At one point, Carnevil was once regarded as the most twisted video game ever created. Now keep in mind, this game was made after the very controversial Mortal Kombat. For many companies, it was and still is all about making a fun game for everyone to enjoy. But in the 90s, it was all about shock value and how far they could push it. Carnevil was a perfect example of that. From zombified teenagers and elves to a massive zombie baby. That last one was so controversial that the game shipped with a cheat code so that the arcade that owned a Carnevil cabinet could change the baby to an oversized and torn up teddy bear to try to keep from offending any arcade goers, or more importantly, to avoid offending their parents. Just imagine walking into an arcade on Halloween night and finding this horror staring you in the face. This made it one of the most notorious arcade games of all time. It all starts with a simple tractor ride through Greeley Valley Cemetery. Spooky Sam's Ghost Tour has a wagon full of kids eager to get some scares on Halloween night. Then, the tour guide mentions the legendary Ludwig von Tokentaker. When our player comes up to the grave, he finds a lone token sitting on top of the tombstone. Here, he grabs it and glances at it for a second. Then, he turns it up to the top of the headstone, where there's a stone jester head with its mouth wide open. Without hesitation, he places the token into the mouth of the jester, and literally all hell breaks loose. Now it's up to you and your partner Betty to take up a couple of shotguns from the shooting gallery and take down hordes of monsters and the undead before they bring a whole new meaning to Nightmare Before Christmas. The game features 4 main levels: Haunted House, a house filled with all sorts of ghouls, zombies, and others headed off by Evil Marie. Rickety Town, a wannabe North Pole with elves and suited up dinos, finished by none other than Krampus himself. Freak Show, crowded by freaks galore, topped by possibly the most disturbing boss in the game, Junior. And finally, the main event, Big Top. A warped and wicked circus, which eventually carried the player to the top, where they are faced with Token Taker, the ringleader who organized this little shindig, backed by Umlaut, the jester who's been walking us through this ordeal from the beginning. Once Token Taker is finally defeated, everything goes back to normal, and the token that started it all is found in the player's hand. To which he takes a quick glance at it. And reinserts it into the tombstone slot, opening the madness up all over again. House of the Dead and Carnevil were unlike any other. House of the Dead had many other sequels, yet Carnevil never had anything like that. It showed up, gave us nightmares, and slowly faded to be forgotten. Luckily, not forgotten completely, as it inspired so many other horror rail shooters like it. There were different generations of developers to make all sorts of scary shooters. Even some that stated that they were 4D, because the cabinet itself would blow air into the player's face, shake the seat during intense moments, and would even take advantage of surround sound in ways that would send shivers down any player's spine. Without these two pillars in the arcade community, the genre would have never grown to the height that it is now. And even now, this genre gives players an experience unlike any other. Far different than any horror movie, and the closest to it would be VR experiences like Resident Evil 7. Yet even then, without these two classics, we might not have ever gotten games like that. So looking back, maybe they weren't so bad after all. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. I just wanted to end it with a couple of quick little shoutouts here. First off, I'd like to give a shout out to this user here on YouTube who left me a comment. His username was the Overseer Omniversec, and he said, "Don't stop making content. I see so much potential." Just a few little words can have such a big effect on somebody, so thank you for that. Second off, I'd like to shout out Matt Kwid over on SoundCloud. Today's video featured all of his tracks, whether it be OG tracks that he's made or tracks that he's cut from other artists. So just a quick shout out to him, and you should definitely check out his SoundCloud. Link is going to be in the description. Other than that, that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much again for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Hopefully I can push something out in the next couple of weeks. But I guess we'll see you next time.